Terry Mclaurin has requested a trade from the Commanders. Let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens wide receiver room and whether or not the Ravens should make a trade for the Pro Bowl level wide receiver. Now, first off, if you didn't know, Terry McLaurin is trying to sign a contract extension with the Washington Commanders, and negotiations haven't been going very well. And he feels like he's not going to get the proper money from them. So he wants to get a contract extension with somebody else. Now, that means that he probably wants to get a contract extension if he gets traded somewhere. So if the Ravens trade for Terry McLaurin, it's most likely that Terry McLaurin would want that contract extension. It doesn't mean for certain that he would need a contract extension, but it's likely what he is looking for. He doesn't want to hit the open market. He wants to win wherever he's at. And the reason why people make these contract extension talks lead to a trade request is to incentivize the team not to trade them necessarily, but it's more just, dude, pay me my money now, or it's just letting them know I'm fine with walking next year. That's basically the biggest thing he's telling the Commanders, who did very well in the playoffs last year and are expected to be even better with Jane Daniels going into his second season. So it does make sense that he wants to stay a Commander. However, if they're not going to pay him this year, he wants to get out of Dodge, right? So, but the Baltimore Ravens, is Terry McLaurin the answer for the Baltimore Ravens this year? I think it would solve a lot of problems. The question at wide receiver for depth, the question of who's wide receiver one, would be answered immediately. The question mark is, though, is would Terry McLaurin be happy here? Did the Ravens have enough money to pay him for an extension? And would the Ravens even make a move like that this close to the season starting? If I'm looking at it from the first half, I'm saying these are some great positives. Terry McLaurin is a star wide receiver. He's a top 15 receiver in the NFL. He's a true number one wide receiver. He can go up and make the jump ball. He can make the big play. He can make a play on third down. He can do it all. But then you look at the money, and he's $15 million cap hit this year, just over $15 million cap hit this year. The Ravens can make that work. However, a contract extension for him is just not in the cards for the team. Right now, would they be able to sign it? Yes. But Terry McLaurin is going to be making, I would assume, $25 to $30 million a year based on how recent. I mean, he could make up to $35 million a year. That's how good he is. But 25 to 30 is kind of what I would be expecting him to make. And the Ravens, with the players that they're trying to extend, they just don't have the capital to give that out. Technically, yes. But also, like, that's sacrificing Kyle Hamilton. That's sacrificing getting one of our tight ends. That's maybe also sacrificing Tyler Linderbaum. We haven't extended Odafe away. Kyle Van Noy is going to be a free agent. Like, it would basically decimate our team for the next few years, or at least we would lose at least 2 or 3 of our key contributors to acquire a player at a position that we are still pretty decent at. The Ravens wide receiver room is not as bad as it's been throughout, Lamar Jackson's tenure. Is it a top 5 unit in the NFL? No. But I would say it's probably average between the 13th best and 18th best wide receiver room in the NFL. I think that's a fair ranking for the Baltimore Ravens wide receiver room when you look at Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, obviously DeAndre Hopkins. Like, I think that's pretty solid. But the other thing I wanted to talk about in this video was the depth that we have. Because people, yes, will a star work in the Ravens offense? Yes, they will help. But one of the biggest things that this Ravens wide receiver room has that it hasn't had, maybe in the history of the franchise, is legitimate true depth. When you look at wide receiver 3 being DeAndre Hopkins, that's a solid wide receiver 3. But after that is still good contributing level players. Tylan Wallace is on the roster. Tylan Wallace can be a wide receiver 3 in the NFL. He is a good football player. Tez Walker is a good option. But one player that I really want to bring up is LeJontay Wester, because he can absolutely be a contributing player for the Baltimore Ravens this year. Not just as a punt return specialist, where he has been phenomenal in practice outside of one dropped punt, but also as a kick returner, as a slot receiver, as a gadget player, as an outside wide receiver. LeJontay Wester is not just a gadget player. He is a do-it-all wide receiver that can make plays, get open, and make guys miss in space. He's a legitimate wide receiver in the NFL. Now, was he a little bit limited at Colorado because of their offense and the wide receivers they had around him? Yes, because they had a good deep threat right, in Jimmy Horn. They had a really good X wide receiver in Travis Hunter. So they stuck him in the slot, and he was a really good slot wide receiver, but he can play out wide. So LeJohntay Wester, I do not want anybody sleeping on him because he is a legitimate weapon and he should get snaps at wide receiver this year. But if we make a splash trade, he's just going to have no opportunity. But the other player that I wanted to bring up is an undrafted free agent for the Baltimore Ravens last season, and that's Dayton Wade. Dayton Wade, throughout all of last training camp and preseason, was an absolute playmaker. When he got into the games, it felt like he was the wide receiver everybody wanted to target, not because he was the only wide receiver, but because he was the only wide receiver that got open. And when he got open, he actually made the catches. He was one of the biggest highlight career makers of all time at Ole Miss. If you have not seen his highlights, it is phenomenal the way that he was catching the football. Just jump balls, acrobatic catches. That's what he does. And he's an undersized wide receiver that makes plays over the middle in NFL preseason games, which I'm very excited to see him next week because shout out, NFL preseason is back tonight. Very excited, Hall of Fame game. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I do not think the Ravens should trade for Terry McLaurin. Would it be awesome if they did? Sure. Like, I'd be stoked. But at the same time, like, we're not extending him. So there's a chance we trade for him. And then he's just like, I'm not playing for you. And that would suck. So unfortunately, Terry McLaurin is out of the cards. But LeJohntay Wester, Dayton Wade, those are two of the guys that I'm absolutely looking forward to watching in the upcoming preseason games. And I'm paying attention to them at training camp because they're having pretty good training camps if you haven't heard already. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for more. Let me know your thoughts on Terry McLaurin, LeJohntay Wester, Dayton Wade. And it should be a lot of fun that football's back tonight. So let me know if you're watching. I'll be watching. But I'll see all of you again tomorrow.